simply your well-being channel. My name is Jacky, and today on this episode of Just Be, we're going to discuss a topic that is very close to my heart, past life regression. It brings me great joy to discuss this with my friend and fellow colleague, a hypnotherapist and transpersonal regression therapist, Jessica Canero. Jessica has a background in psychology and she practices and trains hypnotherapy as well. Now, past life regression has brought about miraculous changes in her own life, and she goes about and practices this with her clients as well, bringing about the same kind of shifts in their lives too. So, welcome, Jessica, on the show with us. Thank you for joining us in this discussion. And to quickly start with, wanting to know a little bit more about you. So tell me how did you land up on this topic of past life regression? Culturally, did you always believe in reincarnation? How did you get onto this work?
Sure. There's quite a story there, but basically, I grew up in Australia, and in sort of the Western culture in general, there isn't much discussion on past lives, and certainly I can say in my life, right from when I was very little, this wasn't part of everyday life. It wasn't something that was ever discussed. I did grow up in a Christian household, so to Christianity, past lives is not recognized or not believed in. But I was very much unaware of it. Even as a fable, even as a story, I didn't know much about the concept of past lives. And so I really sort of found my niche in it much later on when I started to look into self-healing. But at that point, obviously, where you start to see the East mixing with the West, this is where you start to connect a lot of dots in your life, things that I couldn't explain from childhood, things that not just for me, with my family, with people that I knew. So it was a beautiful journey, but it definitely wasn't there my whole life. It came much later.
Wow, and how did you first encounter past life? Was it in your own zone, or did you see something? Did you watch something happening? What was your first encounter with this?
So for me, when I started to go into holistic healing, and again, this was purely from a space of dealing with, certain aspects of my life that I knew were very current, or I thought were very current, like current life-based. And the exploration was there, and I did, courses in hypnotherapy and regression therapy. And my first encounter was in the hypnotherapy course, where a couple of modules in, we had dealt with a lot of topics regarding current life, and then slowly the switch was moving towards past life. And I think the very first encounter was sort of an exploratory session. We just sort of sat down and just used a trigger and to see what would come up in a past life. And straight away, I had my first encounter with a very, very powerful story that to this day I would still say actually and maintain that it is my most powerful past life in the terms of how it's affecting me in the present. So it was a straight dive in once I got in there.
Wow. And how did you feel after that experience? So that first time when you saw that live, how did you come out of it? What did you think? What did you feel then?
I was amazed. So we had sort of discussed past lives as a theory, the theoretical side of it, and I sort of understood, okay, like the concept is very clear and I can understand how it makes sense. But for me, it was making sense more in relation to other people, not really with myself. And then when I had that own personal experience, I just remember coming out and thinking, like, this explains so much. But the process doesn't happen overnight. It's a huge shift in your belief system. So I would say that it took me quite a few months of exploring and doing more sessions in past lives for me to really actually start seeing this as something so explicit and so real, because even at first you can sort of see it as a symbol or a metaphor for certain things in your life. But after a couple more experiences post my first, I was convinced. I was like, I was feeling it, I was experiencing it in the now, and I was like, this is 100% real. So it was amazing.
Wow. And going from there, now practicing with your clients, bringing about that shift, where people come out of it and say, oh my God, that makes complete sense. That's a long way for you, right? That's amazing. Beautiful.
Oh yeah, very much so.
So now one of the common questions that I have come across, and a lot of people have, is we are dealing with so much of issues in our current life, right? I was going to
Mhm.
almost going to use the word, but we're dealing with so much of mess, let's say, in our life, in our current life. Why do we need to go to the past? Like, isn't this enough? And then bring about worse from the past. So what do you have to say to that? Like, we're already dealing with so much of mess in our current life. We can't even handle this. And now, you're asking us to go to the past. So how do
Mm.
we deal with this question?
Sure. So the whole idea is that, with certain things that are happening in your life, so of course we always encourage to explore the present life, explore what's actually, what you're aware of and what you can do to help yourself now, of course, always to do that. But there comes a time where, if there is a part of you, that is stuck in a past life, there is an issue unresolved from that past life that is affecting you in the current life, then you can do so many layers of therapy in the present life, but if it actually doesn't originate from here, then you'll find that the problem will still persist. And sometimes it can transfer, it can result in a different aspect of your life, but as you work on current life issues, that is. But if you don't actually go back to that past life and work with that trigger, work with that origin, then you may still find that it's sort of like an itch that just continues persisting. So, we encourage and say that we don't take you back to past lives for you to be stuck there, for you to be engaged with who you were, because at the end of the day, that life is over, but more so to bring more of a peace and an understanding to your current life, and to bring about a new vitality, a new beautiful way of living. So it really does, by exploring the past, ironically enough, it brings you into a more stronger sense of the present. So
Yeah,
that's very important
ironically,
as
as
we
you
know.
said, right? Like the more you go and you deal with that, the more centered you start to feel in your current life, right? So,
Correct.
so what are the kind of issues, for which one could explore past life? What kind of issues for which we can go about exploring the past life?
I have seen and worked with a whole range of issues, Jackie. I've seen and I've worked with physical issues, from migraines to back pains to stomach pains to leg pains, emotional issues. We have anxiety, which is the most common. We also have unexplained fears and phobias. And of course, you have mental issues. You have depression. You have paranoia, whether it's explained or unexplained. And there's sort of these fears as well, these senses of that I'm not where I'm supposed to be, that I always feel like things are going wrong in my life. I always have negative thoughts. These thoughts are not mine. So even irrational thoughts can take people back to a past life. So I would say that there's really nothing that I would say is wrong or is not associated, in the sense that it can be associated with a past life. But of course, I always encourage people, especially with physical issues, please do go and see a medical professional. These are only for when these issues persist and persist again. And the medical world has sort of stepped back and no longer is able to help you. And then we say, well, do explore a past life, because you just never know.
Right. So what you explaining is anything that is unexplainable. Anything of your physical issue that simply does not
Something
um
that's chronic, it just
yes,
doesn't go away.
right, doesn't go away, and also is when it becomes a suffering, right? So to have a physical issue is one thing, but then when that becomes a suffering for you, whether it be emotional as well, and even phobias and fears sometimes can really be debilitating in that sense, right? So anything that becomes a suffering for you, you can go about and explore past lives. Wonderful. I've seen a lot of times in clients when they visit the past life, um, when the life hasn't ended well, right? That
Mm-hmm.
also can bring about a lot of phobias, right? When they have either died in a very close space, can bring about a phobia of close spaces. When they have died, attacked by an animal, can actually bring about phobia of that animal, right? So anything that hasn't ended well in your space is just not ended well. So you need to go back and end that well.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.